We have time for a few questions. Yep.
Hi, Renisa from the Global TB Community Advisory Board. Thank you for both your presentations. I think drug manufacturing doesn't necessarily translate into diagnostic manufacturing. And if you're going to say that you have that ability, then it's good to show your capacity in your presentation. Secondly, the issue of importing knowledge or importing skills really lies to the fact that the syllabus in the universities hasn't been amended for about 40 years. And so the onus to really try and develop that kind of capacity from the university level should actually come from pharma, because you're the ones who are importing this skill, and we need a proactive way of supporting the universities in school. So that's, rather the universities, so that's something for food of thought, or food for thought. Okay, and then another thing in East Africa, it's great that you've shown us like the different types of reviews that you've gone through and the different types of certification, including the WHO. But I'd just like your take on how you build enough confidence and trust within the East African community. Thank you so much. And then also I'd like to know what stage you're in starting manufacturing capacity, diagnostic capacity, because it was inferred that Kenya is a potential diagnostic manufacturing country. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for raising those points. And there certainly are differences, and it would be foolish to downplay the differences between pharmaceutical manufacturing and diagnostic manufacturing. That's why I think it's important that there be a true partnership between, in this case, Wave 80 and Universal Pharma, where Wave 80 can bring the diagnostics manufacturing expertise, and Universal Pharma has the facility and the staff and the inspections and the quality system that can be adapted for diagnostics production. And and it's not to minimize the challenges in producing a diagnostic, but it is, I think, it's generally more straightforward to get a diagnostics consumable manufacturing process up and running compared to a pharmaceutical manufacturing process up and running from scratch, if one were to look at it that way. And Paulo, do you want to speak to the other points?
Thank you. I think you're right. It's pharma's job to make sure, or try and help universities change the curriculum. We have, as a program, started already in Kenya, where we are engaging universities, and there are now 2 industrial pharmacy courses already, but there's a lot more to be done. But there is continuous engagement, and there is also a program in conjunction with UNIDO that is helping revamp the GMP standards, and one of the agenda items in there is also to help universities get the right stuff from the universities. So it's already ongoing, and yes, that's the way forward. Getting the trust in the EAC, I think it is getting again there. We have now Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers for East Africa, which also GIZ is supporting, UNIDO is supporting, and again there is a lot of development in that area where regulators are also on board, and we are working as a team now. So for sure, that's an ongoing thing, and it is in the right direction.
Other questions?
Hi, thanks for that presentation. This is Erica Lesson from TAG again. I think the point that you raised about the difficulty competing with non-quality assured respondents to tenders is a really good one, and one that's going to become an increasing challenge for TB, particularly as countries graduate out of Global Fund, which has quality assurance requirements for at least the second-line drugs. And I was wondering how you think, we as advocates and as people working in different countries can encourage countries to actually add a quality requirement to their tender process. What kind of, lobbying or discussions or convincing this might take?
I would say even today, 65 or 70% of all the medicines coming into Africa are funded through donors. There are certain donors who give the money direct to the government, and then the government does the procurement. But in those cases, if they are not ARV, TB, malaria related, they do not have any quality requirements. If you take USAID as example, they have funded the Kenya government, but they have a quality requirement. They say that if there is a company or only manufacturers that are approved by their quality requirements can quote on that tender. So as an example, that could be a condition where money directly is given to governments with a quality rider.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a clarification in the TB arena. The Global Fund preferentially exhorts countries to rely on the Global Drug Facility, which facilitates procurement at reasonable prices of quality assured drugs. So there is that space, and in fact one of the conundrums they're going through is they've been doing so relatively well with the procurement of quality assured drugs that now they're being asked, can you do other commodities such as diagnostics, et cetera? So they're looking into expanding to that field.
Other questions? I have one. So, well, you're off. Yeah. You know, this is a really ambitious plan, which I think is quite cool. But if you look at all of the things that have to fall into place, like from converting a pharma competency into a diagnostic competency, both for quality systems, which are different regulations, manufacturing, the distributors that you have will need to be trained. Have you laid out a roadmap between Wave 80 and your company on what has to happen when to kind of pull this off, right? Because you did a very good job, Dan, the analysis going into a market or identifying the right partners, showed a diligence that, you know, does that translate into kind of your future challenges to pull this entire enterprise off?
Yeah, and we have and continue to do so, and that process really is fairly similar to the process that applies to any other manufacturing process transfer, just with a little bit more hands-on elements to it. But in any manufacturing process transfer from a development shop into a contract manufacturer, there's a set of specs that are outlined, there's an initial product run that gets carried out, there's the need to get to 3 GMP manufactured lots. There's the process that's undertaken to ensure that lot-to-lot reproducibility is very good. You know, all these things are the same for working with Universal Pharma as working with another contract manufacturer. I think maybe one element to add in terms of making the whole process more tractable is that not every aspect of cartridge manufacturing, in this case, happens at Universal Pharma. So you notice there were a couple of other facilities shown in the map of where the manufacturing facilities are and the manufacturing resources are. And so there's a really important and value add step, a set of steps in cartridge manufacturing that does happen will happen at the Kenyan facility, but it's not that you know, the cylinders of raw plastic are rolling up to the back of Universal Pharma. There are several other upstream steps in the manufacturing process that make it such that the set of processes that happen at Universal Pharma are a relatively manageable set.
So along the lines of Jim's question, how have you got an estimate for how long you can run in deficit spending to get to profitability, and where the real breakpoints are in terms of the cost?
Yeah, you know, like any commercial operation, obviously we're going to be fairly close to the vest in terms of the economics. Obviously, this is something we wouldn't be undertaking if we didn't see an opportunity to be achieving favorable economic outcomes in a reasonable time frame, in the 3 to 5 year time frame.
In relation to costs, if you're going to develop a new TB drug and it's a blockbuster, you can sell it for X.
But if you're going into the diagnostic with TB, you can't even think about it unless you know at the end it's going to be cheap. And so how do you, it's almost like you start the process and you think, I can't get there, and you just drop out. So what do you think going into it now, what your target is in terms of your product to make sure it's going to be a useful product?
Yeah, so pricing in diagnostics is well known to have a lot of downward pressure, and Wave 80 is relatively new in the TB area. So while there's been a lot of work done in one aspect of a TB molecular product at Wave 80, that's the sputum sample prep and outputting a real nice chunk of bacterial DNA for the downstream assay. The actual development of a product, we're still refining the TPP for that, and that's why it's useful for me to be at this meeting and for all of you in this room to be contributing to the discussion about what the unmet needs are and what the priorities should be for TB diagnostics developers. I think from our standpoint, we've looked at both a straight up molecular test for TB and also at the reflex testing model and at built-in drug resistance testing included in the baseline test. And each of those has advantages and disadvantages and cost impacts. And it's difficult for us as a small company to identify which of those products is the right one. In HIV, it's more straightforward. The clear priority in HIV is how much virus is there. And so I think that the field is starting to move toward a consensus around what the priority should be in a TB molecular product and what the corresponding price points are that is appropriate given the need for finite resources to go to all other aspects of TB patient care. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, Madhu.
Question for Palu. So given that we've learned that import duties are a huge problem with diagnostics, at what point does in-country manufacturer qualify to waive import duties? For example, if you could source only certain components or assemble them in your country and not necessarily import a completed product, would you be able to get around that extraordinarily high import tariffs? Like car manufacturers have clearly figured this out. Most people manufacture assemble in country with locally sourced products, but they never pay those extraordinary import duties on cars. So could we do something for diagnostics?
Yes, it's, the rules of origin that in East Africa, for example, there are 3 bands. There's a zero-rated band on duty where it is used as a raw material. There is 10% duty for an intermediate product and 25% for a finished product. Wherever there's a change of tariff heading, so if you're using intermediates, like what you're saying, assembling would be intermediates, yes, then you would have to pay the 10%. But when you assemble it and you change the tariff heading from chapter X to chapter Y, you apply the 10%. In certain cases where it's raw materials, like pharma, raw materials are under chapter 29, and the finished product is 30. So world over, there's a 30% value addition, but in East Africa for pharma, it is change in tariff heading. So I think the same could be applied to reduce the taxes.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we are at a break, Lindsay. Yeah. So we'll come back at 9:30 sharp. Thank you.